10 years before the Spaniards reached Tenochtitlan, the sky opened like a wound, or so survivors would say decades after their world had already ended. A column of fire appeared in the east after midnight. Temples burned without explanation. The lake rose against the city. A woman wandered through the darkness, crying that she could not save her children. Fishermen brought the emperor a bird whose head reflected an army no one had yet seen. Then malformed figures appeared and vanished the moment they were taken before him. There were 8 signs in all. They are among the most haunting passages in the history of the conquest of Mexico. They are also not eyewitness reports written before the invasion. The best-known sequence appears at the beginning of Book 12 of the Florentine Codex, a monumental work assembled after the conquest by the Franciscan Bernardino de Sahagún, together with Nahua elders, writers, translators, and artists. The surviving manuscript reached its final form more than half a century after Tenochtitlan fell. That does not make the omens meaningless, it makes them dangerous in a different way. If the stories preserve genuine memories, then the Mexica may have watched their world behave in ways they could not explain. If the stories were shaped after the catastrophe, they reveal how survivors turned invasion, epidemic, siege, and defeat into a pattern the universe had announced in advance. And if both are true, if real events were remembered through the knowledge of what came later, then the 8 omens are neither simple history nor simple myth. They are the moment memory learned how the story ended. The Florentine Codex says the first omen appeared 10 years before the arrival of the Spaniards. In the night sky, something like a flame, a tongue of fire, or the light before dawn rose from the earth toward the heavens. It appeared in the east around midnight and remained until daylight erased it. The account says it returned for a year, provoking cries and fear. Modern writers often call it a comet. That is possible, but no identification is secure. The description could refer to a comet, an atmospheric display, a column of light, or a remembered phenomenon reshaped by later storytelling. Calling it one of the brightest comets in human history invents certainty where the source gives only an image. The image itself is enough. For the Mexica, the sky was not empty space. Calendrical specialists tracked cycles, priests interpreted signs, and rulers understood extraordinary natural events within a sacred and political order. An unfamiliar light did not need to violate the laws of nature to become terrifying. It only needed to appear outside the expected pattern. The second omen moved from heaven to the sacred center of the capital. According to the account, the temple associated with Huitzilopochtli caught fire. Flames emerged unexpectedly. When people rushed with water, the blaze only intensified, and the structure burned. The original script turns this into a detailed fire beginning inside wooden pillars and reducing the sanctuary completely to ash. Those details go beyond what can safely be claimed. What the narrative wants us to see is more important. The divine house of the Mexica patron burning before an enemy has arrived. The third omen struck another temple, identified in the Florentine account as a structure associated with Xiuhtecutli. It was hit by fire from the sky, even though witnesses heard no thunder. People later called the event a lightning strike, but the absence of thunder made it uncanny. A temple connected to fire had been consumed by celestial fire without the warning that should have accompanied it. The sequence is almost too perfect. First the sky burns, then the sanctuary of the war god burns. Then the house linked to the fire deity is struck from above. Each sign advances closer to the political and sacred center. The fourth omen crossed the daylight sky. The source describes fire streaming while the sun still shone, dividing into several parts and showering sparks. A great sound accompanied it. This has been interpreted as meteors or a bolide breaking apart in the atmosphere. Again, there is no surviving physical evidence that allows us to identify a specific event. The people who told the story did not need its modern scientific name. They remembered the sky appearing to fracture in public. Then the direction of danger changed. The fifth omen came from Lake Texcoco. The water churned or boiled without an obvious wind. Waves struck the foundations of houses, flooding parts of the city. Tenochtitlan depended on the lake for transport, food, defense, and its very geography. Water had protected the Mexica and made their capital possible. In the omen, the same water turns against them. A sudden surge might have resulted from wind, seismic movement, flooding, or another natural cause. But assigning one explanation centuries later would be speculation. The surviving narrative presents the event not as a weather report, but as a reversal. The element holding the city above the lake begins to pull it down. The sixth omen has outlived all the others because it has a voice. At night, a woman was heard crying through the city. She lamented that her children would have to leave and asked where she could take them. The source does not give us a modern ghost story with a complete identity and biography. It gives us grief without a visible body, a mother already mourning displacement before conquest begins. The resemblance to La Llorona is obvious, and many popular accounts call this the origin of the later legend. A direct line cannot be proven so neatly. Stories of supernatural women, motherhood, water, death, and lament changed across indigenous and Spanish traditions during the colonial period. The omen may have contributed to the legend familiar today, but it should not be labeled its confirmed historical beginning. Inside the conquest narrative, the woman's function is devastating. Fire can be fought, a flood can be survived. A voice announcing that there will be no safe place for the children attacks the future itself. The seventh omen entered Moctezuma's palace. Fishermen captured an unusual bird, often described as crane-like or ash-colored. On its head was a strange round surface resembling a mirror. When Moctezuma looked into it, the story says he first saw stars. Looking again, he saw people approaching in formation, carried on the backs of deer-like animals and equipped for war. The image would have been unmistakable after 1521. Spaniards wearing metal armor and riding horses, creatures unknown in central Mexico before contact. But this is precisely where historical caution matters most. The omen is recorded after horses and armored invaders had become symbols of conquest. It may preserve a pre-conquest dream, divination, or tale. It may be retrospective symbolism. It may combine older ideas about mirrors and revelation with knowledge acquired during the invasion. What it cannot be called is a verified vision of Cortés's army before it existed. In 1509, Cortés was not already leading floating mountains across the Atlantic toward Mexico in perfect synchronization with prophecy. His expedition departed Cuba a decade later. Earlier Spanish voyages reached parts of the region before 1519, but the final image in the mirror knows the appearance of the conquest too well to be treated like a neutral report. The eighth omen abandons natural explanation entirely. The account describes people with two bodies or joined forms being brought before Moctezuma. Once he saw them, they disappeared. The original script calls this reality glitching, but that language turns sacred narrative into science fiction. The scene belongs to a world of prodigies, doubles, unstable bodies, and signs. Its power lies not in proving a physical anomaly, but in placing the emperor before something his authority cannot hold. One by one, the omens remove every form of control. Astronomical knowledge cannot close the wound in the sky. Water cannot extinguish the sacred fire. Architecture cannot resist the lake. Guards cannot capture a voice. The emperor cannot summon the vision back once his advisors arrive. Even the bodies delivered to his palace refuse to remain. The list is therefore a carefully escalating narrative, not a random file of unusual weather reports. And at its center stands Moctezuma II. Popular history often portrays him as a brilliant but superstitious ruler, slowly driven mad by prophecy. He supposedly watches the stars from his roof, imprisons astronomers who cannot explain a comet, sinks into depression, and becomes incapable of defending his empire. Much of that portrait comes from combining different late accounts, expanding dramatic details, and reading every decision backward from defeat. The historical Moctezuma was not merely a frightened mystic. He was a ruler formed within the elite institutions of Tenochtitlan, experienced in war, religion, tribute, diplomacy, and court politics. Under his reign, imperial campaigns continued. He managed nobles, subject rulers, merchants, messengers, and intelligence across a wide region. A man could take omens seriously and still act strategically. In his society, those were not opposites. When credible reports of strange foreigners reached him, Moctezuma did not simply sit in darkness waiting for destiny. Messengers traveled, information was gathered, gifts were sent, envoys observed the newcomers. Diplomatic gestures attempted to manage distance, intentions, and danger. His choices can be criticized, but they were choices made inside an unprecedented crisis, not proof that prophecy had erased his will. Nor did the empire begin collapsing from the inside 10 years before Cortés arrived. The Triple Alliance remained the dominant power in central Mexico. It had enemies, tributary tensions, and political vulnerabilities, but it had not entered a decade-long collective madness. The language of internal collapse makes the Spanish invasion appear like the final touch against a state already dead. Tenochtitlan was not dead. Capturing it required indigenous armies, epidemic disease, brigantines on the lake, a prolonged siege, the destruction of water and food routes, and brutal combat through streets and canals. The fatalistic Moctezuma story performs a useful trick. It makes conquest seem inevitable before the invaders earn it. For Spanish Christian writers, omens could suggest providence. Pagan power had been warned that a new religious order was approaching. For Nahua survivors and descendants, the same signs could explain a disaster too great to fit ordinary causation. If heaven had announced the end, defeat did not mean their ancestors lacked courage or intelligence. The catastrophe had exceeded human power. That does not mean indigenous contributors merely repeated a Spanish script. The Florentine Codex is a complex bilingual work, produced through unequal colonial conditions, but filled with Nahua language, concepts, memories, artistry, and judgment. Its account cannot be reduced to either authentic Aztec testimony or Spanish fabrication. Both labels erase the difficult process through which it was made. The 8 omens may contain different layers. There may have been remembered fires, storms, celestial events, floods, unusual births, rumors, and ritual interpretations during Moctezuma's reign. Some stories may have circulated before the Spaniards. After the conquest, narrators could select those memories, order them, and attach them to a 10-year countdown. Details resembling horses and armored formations could sharpen as the ending became known. Grief could take the voice of a woman searching for her children. Memory does not have to invent an event completely to transform its meaning. Consider the first omen. Before the conquest, a strange light might have meant danger, famine, war, dynastic change, or cosmic instability. After the conquest, it meant the Spaniards. Once history supplied the answer, every earlier fear could be made to point toward it. That is how prophecy often works in historical writing. The prediction becomes precise only after the event. The original script asks whether the omens were actual anomalies or empire-wide hysteria. That is the wrong choice. An event can be physically real without producing one universal reaction. A temple fire might occur. Some residents might fear divine anger. Others might suspect negligence, and many might never witness it. Later history can compress those different experiences into a city crying with one voice. There is no evidence for a single psychological breakdown shared by millions of people. The script also asks whether the universe truly signals the end of an era. History cannot answer that supernatural question. What it can show is that human beings search backward after disaster. We find the unusual dream, the storm, the warning no one understood, the sentence that suddenly sounds prophetic. Then we connect them until chaos becomes a path. That path can comfort survivors. It can excuse rulers. It can legitimize conquerors. It can also preserve emotional truth that military reports cannot capture. The woman's cry may never have echoed exactly as the Codex records it. Yet her question, "Where can I take my children?" became horribly real during the siege of 1521, when disease, hunger, collapsing houses, and combat trapped families inside the island city. As literal prediction, the omen is uncertain. As memory of what conquest did to civilians, it is almost unbearable. The bird's mirror may never have shown mounted soldiers. Yet after the invasion, Nahua communities truly had to confront an enemy whose animals, weapons, alliances, language, and ambitions disrupted familiar categories. The vision captures the experience of seeing the impossible become political fact. The joined bodies may never have vanished from Moctezuma's palace. Yet the old world of the Triple Alliance did disappear, transformed into a colonial order whose shape no ruler in 1509 could have predicted. The omens endure because they are not 8 failed scientific observations. They are 8 images of power discovering its limits. So perhaps the real mystery is not whether a comet predicted Cortés. It is why later generations needed the sky, temples, lake, mother, animal, and human body, all to announce the same ending. How catastrophic must an event be before ordinary causes no longer feel large enough to explain it? Tell us which possibility you find more haunting, that the signs were remembered events, or that conquest rearranged memory until the past appeared to predict the future. Subscribe to the History Ledger and continue with us into the next prophecy written after its fulfillment. The heavens may not keep records, but the ledger remembers who interpreted them.